Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. How are you? How are you doing? Great. I'm so glad to be the one thing that keeps you from your spritz on the other side of this, right? I just realized I'm right before your aperitivo, your dinner time, so good thing I like a challenge. So thank you for that generous introduction. My name is Donatella Taurasi, and I'm really glad to be here with you today. It's amazing to have such much knowledge, willingness to learn, to challenge our mindsets, and also creativity, all in one big room. So I'm really honored to be here. Thank you to the organizers and the teams, or the teams that were able to put this event together. It's very challenging. I do this often in my line of work. Just make sure you thank the staff as you walk around. It's a very hard job to do. So today, I come here with a message from the business people. And you know the rules. We don't shoot the messenger, okay? We just take the message at heart. What is the message? The message is from business leaders, and their message is clearly, we are desperate to work with you and to do it well. We want to really extract every last ounce of value from what you do and the way you do it. Those are exactly the same type of people that you avoid at all costs. And don't try to deny it. I have way too many years under the belt working with companies all over the world, and I have experienced firsthand this dysfunctional relationship, right? It's literally two different people, different backgrounds, different languages that, in theory, are on the same team, but somehow they work towards totally different objectives. And believe it or not, that is costly. It's costly to our profession, to what we're trying to do and accomplish, and of course, it's costly for companies. So today, I'd like to pack this message with both some motivation, and here I'm going to lead a bit by fear, the California way, and I'm going to also try to give you few tips, few tools you can use to perhaps do your part. Because this gap is there, we are painfully aware of it, and we see some effort put forward from the business side of the companies, but regrettably, I don't take this personally, we see very little effort on the technical side of the team. So I'm trying to fix that, and hopefully we're going to have a constructive conversation. Please send forward your questions. I'm very happy to try and answer them. So why me? Why now? Why here? My name is Donatella Taurasi, as we were saying earlier. I'm the Made in Italy professor in California. So I actually started my PhD here in Italy in finance. I was always mesmerized with how sophisticated and complex the math in finance was, and yet it was extremely practical, right? You could learn every day and apply what you learned in your real life on a daily basis. But where I really started being interested in data science is when I did part of my PhD between NYU and California. And in California, I understood how my passion really sat into empirical research. And we know, finance has always been a data-rich field, right? There's so much data I could really get, right? And yet, data was disappointing. It was very hard to do any meaningful research or empirical research with data alone. And I was really, really fortunate to be marinating, breathing the excitement around machine learning and data science that was growing in California where I was getting my PhD. Now, you can kind of map my age there, but do not say that out loud. So the idea there is I finally got closer to data science. I got closer to machine learning. And I was really able to bring my research forward because of these skills. And that's where the combination, the intersection between finance and data science came to life. And that's exactly what I do at Berkeley. As soon as I got my PhD, they offered me a job. And my job was one of my hats. I like to say I wear many hats. One of my hats was to teach, to infuse the core curriculum in the business schools with data science, analytics, data, technology. But I was also put in charge of training engineers, computer science fields. Why? because while a lot of people were learning all these wonderful tools, they were having a very hard time understanding how to apply them. So this was one of the ways business schools were trying to bridge that gap between technical and business side. But I like to talk the talk. So I also wear the hat of Chief Science Officer in a forward-looking asset management company based in San Francisco, Global Investment, that allows me again to bridge, right? To bridge the academic view with what practitioners do in practice. And this bridge, the ability to bring together science and what practitioners actually do in the field allows us to create better investment choices for our customers. And although I wear different hats, where my heart is actually education. There's nothing more powerful than educating and training people, exposing individuals to the future they can possibly imagine and create. So I'm very glad to be working with the Data Masters team. Some of you are here, say hi. I'm sure you met them around. I am actually, yeah, they should deserve a clap, but it's okay. And the reason why, regardless of the very little time I have, I really like working with Data Masters is because they are taking the mission I have at heart and they're putting it in action. They educate and they train individuals to learn the tools and the skills, but also the focus on the application. And that's the key word today. We need to learn how to apply what we know. So as an educator, I was told very early on by an educator with a Nobel Prize that I really admire, that educators are in the business of making people uncomfortable. So get ready, prepare to be uncomfortable. Let's be comfortable with being uncomfortable. The idea today is we're going to challenge, question the status quo. What is the status quo? What we've been doing for the last 10, 15, 20 years. Think about it. What has been the core of our interest? We've been training, right? We've been giving this message that what matters is that we need to learn all the skills. We need to master all the tools. We need to know exactly what's going on in that black box, right? That's what it matters. So we've been investing in that. Any single training product, any educational program is focusing on that, okay? That's been going on for a long time and it keeps going on. And of course, we've been investing in data infrastructure. 2020 came along, and what happened? We all went digital, right? So more data came in. And again, more sophisticated technologies came along to help us deal with this influx of data. And again, all we did was to focus on the technology and on the tools. We've been investing in business intelligence tools, right? We've been growing our teams at an incredible pace with no questions asked from the CFO of our companies, right? We have made history in pioneering the first 8-figure technology stacks with really no questions asked from our CFOs, Chief Financial Officers. Why is that? Because companies out there were looking out at the Nexuses and the Googles and the Amazons of the world, and what they believed was, we have to become like them. It was the easiest thing to do. Let's buy the infrastructure, let's buy the data, let's hire those PhDs, right, that come out of computer science and engineering schools. Did we ever stop a moment and think, is this really bringing value to the table? Are we really converting this effort into value for the company? This is our status quo. We see now, we've experienced in the last few years, a skepticism from the business world. They stopped investing. They stopped putting faith in our effort. And that, as we know, could be fatal. That's the worst possible thing a business could do right now, just move away from data and facts. And yet, we are part of the problem, so we have to work on that. And one of the reasons is that we do not communicate. I'm going to give you a second to absorb this. I know, you're a heron right now, right? That's your lingo. That's how you feel the happiest, right? Now, I can't deny it. I was kind of excited, but at the same time depressed by the fact that I could actually decipher that. Like, this is how you guys talk. This is how we talk. And we are expecting non-technical stakeholders to actually understand us and even want to talk to us. Now, don't get me wrong. That's all good stuff. It's amazing. And you're going to find people you work with that are going to totally understand you and talk in the same set lingo. That's great. But our job isn't limited to our team, right? Or our peers or our communities. Our job is to work towards a common objective, and that's our company's or organization's objective. So we have to work on that. And we need to start really to understand that we need to find a way to quantify the value of our work. We need to start converting our initiatives, our data endeavors into value. We have to demonstrate that value to our business stakeholders. So every time we have a project, every time we have any data initiative in our company, we need to really prove that that investment is aligned with the company's objective. We need to stop, kind of like move away from the hype and start talking about impact. And only that, if we do that, that would be a winning strategy in gaining back the trust from the business stakeholders. And you know why we need the business stakeholders? Because that's who allocates the budget. That's who gets our project from a project to a deployment at scale that becomes a product, a service that changes entire industries. Without that buy-in, we're just having fun. And that's called academia. That's where you want to do that. You don't work in a business to do that, right? So let's try to dive a bit deeper and understand where we can make those changes and how we can make them. Now, I want to bring this message home with a few examples. And I'm sure you're familiar with at least one, but probably most of them. But please indulge me. I really want to, as I was saying, I'm going to lead by fear, really want to bring home the message that this matters. What we do matters. And what I want to talk about today here is how we make it matter in practice. Familiar with the Blockbuster versus Netflix story, right? Blockbuster, dominant player in the video rental industry, right? Thousands of stores worldwide. What did they do wrong? Anyone?
Don't buy Netflix.
Why? They didn't buy Netflix. Why is that? They made a fatal mistake, right? They were disconnected from data and facts. They had a data team, they just didn't listen. Or perhaps they didn't listen because the data team wasn't doing that kind of research, getting insight, understanding market trends, right? In the meantime, Netflix did all the right things. You can take it, we don't mind. Did all the right things. He used data, like a digital platform, right? He used data to understand users' preferences. He used data to make personalized recommendations. He used data to invest in the right streaming technologies. Now, it was 88 billion in 2016. Was it double the value now? More, right? It's huge. 160 billion, something like that. And story repeats itself. Same identical idea, right? Kodak, dominant player. It just didn't have enough insight. It just didn't believe in the trends in the market and made the wrong bet. Actually, what they did at Kodak is what happens most of the time. They actually put money into gaining early on knowledge in the digital photography. They even had patents. They just decided to stay in their comfort zone, right? To stay comfortable. They betted that the current business model would be the winning business model of the future. That's really very, very rarely the case. It's definitely not what happens nowadays, because things change very quickly. Nokia was on the Forbes cover 2007. Who is going to catch Nokia, right? Dominant player. And another mistake. They all have something in common here. Disconnection between data and decisions at the business level. There's not enough trust in what the data tell us. But why? Why this disconnect? And well, actually, this story tells us something else too, right? Do not aim at ending up on a Forbes cover, okay? Turns out that anyone who ends there either ends in jail or something else, so that's not probably a good sign. So what is keeping companies from avoiding this fate? Because that story, I can bring you other hundreds of examples. This story repeats itself at different scales, but repeats itself over and over again. What is it? If you read, I hope you can read this. If you read this, and I can bring you so many infographics that tell you the same story. I just took Gardner because I like Gardner, but the story is the same. What is it? First, foremost, culture challenges to accept change. Really? We are change averse? What a surprise, right? We don't like change. We need to be nudged into change. And why don't we like change? Because we don't know what's going to happen when we change, right? So we need to beat ourselves at that game. Well, of course, if you don't like change, then you're not going to invest in making that change happen. And why don't you trust that change? Well, perhaps because you don't know what that change is about. That goes into data literacy, right? Another big painful point. We don't do enough to spread the news about data science, artificial intelligence. We don't make the effort of making it understandable, accessible to people that might not speak our lingo. And of course, lack of skills, right? We have lack of understanding of data and data literacy in general, but also we actually lack the specialized skills we need at a specific time in the growth of our company. When early on companies were hiring data professionals at an incredible pace, they were just poaching people from academia, which wasn't the right move, right? Because yes, we need the researcher, but we also need all the other people involved in the process, and those were not part of that team. So this is definitely something we can help with, right? We can be the evangelists. We can be the ones who bring data and data science to everybody in the company. And this is part of our mission. Remember the 3 V's of big data by Daglani? Right? In the early 2000s, we had to explain what big data was, right? And so we came up with, volume, velocity, variety. Whereas done data wrangling in their lives, they know how difficult big data can be. But as the world has changed, we actually been adding more V's. The main two are veracity and value. Those I was missing. It's missing from our job today. We need to make sure of the quality of the data we are using, but also we need to understand the value that the data we are processing, using, and learning from is actually creating value for the bottom line for our organizations. So what is the way we're going to move towards companies where data professionals and business stakeholders can actually communicate and work together? Well, there's only 5 steps. And if you read through them, they seem pretty straightforward. Embrace the business, right? Learn about the business. Foster communication also asynchronously. Be welcome towards feedback. Become invested with the data. Get to know the data you work with in the context. Know where your data's been. Know your data's life cycle. And create a semantic layer. Let's all speak the same language when it comes to the important things we're trying to measure. When you read this, I think you feel like a bit cheated on, right? You feel like, I came here to learn something. This seems pretty straightforward, right? Trivial almost. Well, it's easier said than done. I've been observing companies all over the place. And even though I'm tasked with the exact goal to bring data culture to the company, to bring the data teams and the business teams closer together, I see data teams struggle over and over again in executing on these ideas and actually maintaining them over time, making scale them and sustain them over time. So let's see what these steps are. Let's see if we can actually make sense of them. First of all, this first step is about nurturing, creating data empathy. What's data empathy? It's like empathy in any other context. We have to be understanding and considering of other people's preferences, considerations, needs of other people's individuals or teams that work with data. And what we have to understand is that when it comes to data science, when it comes to analytics, processes can be very complex. The jargon can be very complex. And it can be very difficult for non-technical professionals to grasp the meaning behind those processes and this jargon. So it's our job to communicate the data in a manner that is accessible, that is meaningful, that is actually relevant, given those individuals' needs. That's our job. And that's why we've been talking over and over again about storytelling when it comes to data professionals, right? The idea of being able to look at the data, look at our analysis, and actually be able to tell a story about what that data is and what we're trying to get out of it. That's how we get people excited about what we're doing, because we actually make it accessible. They understand what we're doing. But why does that matter? Why do we have to put so much effort in this? They can just go to school and learn about it, right? Why? That's how you create mutual trust. Would you trust something or someone you don't know anything about? You might try, but the first time you are burned, right? Something goes wrong, or you're going to blame that. It's the first thing you can blame. Why? Because you're not touched. You know nothing about that. That's exactly what happens in the company. Anything goes wrong gets blamed on the most obscure team. And the most obscure team's operations is the data team. That's for sure, right? So that is a very important aspect of it. So how can we do it? Take a proactive approach. Get to know the people that matter in the business, the ones who set the strategic objectives. How do you do that? How do you get to know people? You ask them what to do, what they do, what they care about, what are the priorities. How do you do that? You schedule a weekly meeting with them. That's how you do. That's how you do everything. It's really just networking. You go and talk to them, and you understand what's going on, and you talk in terms they can understand. What do you use that table for? What do you think that metric is actually measuring or capturing? If data is delayed, who should I notify first? Who is going to suffer the most? That's how you do it. You try to get at their level, meet them where they are. It's the only way to build that trust. Now, the other part is, of course, communication should be channels should be always available. And in the world we live in, meeting in person becomes pretty hard, right? And sometimes we just don't want to have a conversation about everything, right? Sometimes I just want to send a text to my husband and tell me that, and knowing me, don't do it again, okay? That's all you want to do. So what you want to do is create a system that allows people to provide feedback insights without the need of a real-time response of interaction. And you want a feedback loop, because in that way, you actually commit to taking that feedback into account and act on it. And you want this to be accessible, right? An open platform where everybody can actually interact. Why? Because you want that everyone's interests, every stakeholder's needs be represented. So as the data team, you get an insight on what matters for the stakeholders. As stakeholders, they can actually figure out what other stakeholders care about, what their peers care about. And I really like the role that this type of collaborative system achieves, because as an organization, you can tap on the collective intelligence of the organization. So you actually can put in place actions that really foster the growth mindset that you need in order to thrive as an organization. So this is very important. And how do you do this in practice? Of course, you can have online platform, you can have collaborative platforms, but most companies just use chat platforms, like Slack or Teams. That works great. Just have one dedicated channel where people can interact, provide feedback, and see how things progress. Now, becoming invested with the data is where you start going from talking the talk to actually walking the walk. This is where your genius, your creativity, your understanding of what's going on in the company takes shape. So you really want to avoid what most of us does, and I'm guilty of this too. As soon as I have data, what do? As soon as you have data, and as soon as I made it structured, clean, etc., what do? You just explore, right? That's what we call it. just want to do something. And what do? You just use the most sophisticated tools you just learned that you use, right? So you just try all of them, because why not? It's easy. How many of us sit with the data for a few days? How many of us question that source of that data? What does each single column really tell us? What is even the unit in which it's measured, right? How many of us really do that work? Very rarely, not enough for sure. So being investigated means really understand what the data is telling you, what's possible. And here, in this phase, you have to be developing a culture of experimentation. Experiments are the most powerful tool in our hands. Think about it. You can, with experiments, provide almost a receipt to the CEO of the work you're doing. You can really attach a value that is grounded in proper theory of what the added value of that task is going to be, the outcome is going to be. There's nothing else like that. You can actually measure the return on investment in a very reliable and a very strong way. And yet, so much is written about machine learning and dashboards. Very little is written about p-values and A/B tests, right? Because that sounds sexy. That's not something we like to do. But this is where we convert ideas into value. And now I know your skeptical looks. I see your eyes rolling at me every time I talk about value and creating value and ROI. Now, it might be my finance background talking here, but how do you make a decision? When you have many projects, many options in front of you, and you deal with limited resources, maybe budget, know-how, time, how do you make a decision? What's your guiding criteria? You know where I come from? Finance background. You attach a value to each of those projects. And you gotta do it. Euro, dollars, or yen, it doesn't matter. You have to attach a value to them. And then what you do? Once you attach a value to each of them, you can pick the one project or the subset of projects that maximizes your objective. You see how many things you need to know there to make the decision? It's not straightforward, right? So we need to do that. But how do we do that? How do we create a culture of experimentation? How do we make it so easy for companies to be on board with experiments? Why is it so hard for business leaders to accept experiments as a modus operandi? Experiments come with a probability of failure, the F word. He said it, not me. Failure. Gosh, business leaders hate those words, right? Failure is just the worst possible thing to ever mention, utter in front of business leaders. Why? Because it's the opposite of success. Failure is like we got it wrong. We wasted resources and time. I cannot go to the board and say, oh, we failed an experiment, yippee. But in our world, failure is good. If you can run your experiments right, if you can kind of slice your big idea in small pieces and run experiment after experiment, then failure is a welcome, refreshing source of very cheap information, right? Well, I was just saying expensive information, it's never cheap, right? So we need to do that. We need to teach business leaders that failure is good. Failure does not define us. Failure teaches us what to avoid the next time we try to do the same thing, right? It brings us a step closer to what we need to achieve. Better product, better user engagement, whatever. And then brings me to another very important part of this very long slide, apparently. To be able to run experiments, to be able to really get the business leaders on board, we need to identify a North Star metric. How many of you have identified a North Star metric in your lives? Oh, North Star metric? Okay, one. You're so shy, guys. I promise you're going to have a spritz at the end, okay? It's going to happen. That's important. What do we need as one metric? Something we aim at. One goal in common. You work more united when you actually have a goal in mind, and that's even better if that goal is aligned with the strategic objectives of the company, right? So you have to identify what is you drive these experiments, but what are you trying to achieve, really? So we go back to that value. For example, for e-commerce platform, the usual North Star metric is number of purchases complete in a day, or perhaps customer lifetime value. If you are a social media platform, you might look at engagement, right? You want one or more, definitely a few, not too many, metrics that are clear to everybody. Every single vertical in a company understands that metric, agrees upon the metric, and everybody can work towards that metric. So guess what? When we all agree, especially business stakeholders, and we all work towards the same goal, then we can actually compare apples to apples. And that is priceless. That is something that's really hard to do, even in conventional areas like finance or marketing. And once you do all of that, do not even try to run a big experiment. Do not even get close to those monumental initiatives. Where you want to develop a product, it's going to take forever to do, and then you have to collect it, and then you have to analyze them, and the momentum is gone. Focus on small wins. Identify small niches where you know you can make a difference. Small, non-controversial wins. Okay, that's the key. Small, non-controversial wins. Even with those kind of experiments, you can make a large impact. Okay? If you need the use cases, come to me later. I'll give you all the references. Make sure you build that momentum. Why do you want to do that? Because first of all, you want to build that trust, right? You want to do something that's not costly to the company, it's not controversial, and you start showing that it actually can work. It makes sense. We can change small things and measure the impact of that small thing. The other thing, it gets you a chance to test your processes, your infrastructure, the skills within the team, so that you can actually scale it up much easier. Now, I want to stress something here. You're not going to like it, but that's my job today. Remember, embrace the uncomfortable. Our job does not stop in providing building those dashboards and showing metrics to our non-technical stakeholders. Our job does not end there. We need to be part of the whole process. That means running the experiment, be proactive in terms of experiments, and help interpret the results, and help translate those results in actionable recommendations. We need to take ownership of our projects. We can't just drop the ball midway. This is the only way we can make sure that we are working towards the same objective, and the only way we can actually show with strong evidence that what we do is moving the needle, is making a difference in the company. That's how we ensure ongoing investment in our own data infrastructure and talent. So our job sits in between is exploring and exploiting, right? We keep enjoying the wonderful things we do about reducing costs, improving operations efficiency, et cetera, but our job is also being proactive, finding new insights, understanding new areas, bringing forward new strategies. That is what keeps companies really ahead of the game, right? So in line with Henry Ford's quote, when he mentioned how customers would have asked for faster horses because they couldn't possibly imagine such a revolutionary idea, like the car, the automobile, stakeholders are the same. If you go ask them, they might just tell you, I want faster dashboards, right? That's totally probable. They've probably done it already, right? We have to go beyond that. So yes, be in touch, stay in line with what the objectives, the strategy of the company is, but be proactive. Do your job. Explore. Be the human mind that's being augmented by machine learning and not made like a robot by machine learning. Now, visuals work with non-technical people. So I always recommend using some sort of workflow for data science, right? This is the lean approach. So I like this because it really provides a clear picture. You can actually use icons or pictures. You can communicate the way you want. You can be very creative. And again, if you need inputs, come to me later. I'm happy to share. The idea is you go through this cycle with the other stakeholders. You talk about the problem, you identify the opportunity, you talk about all the possible roadblocks. You actually, kind of have, you see how this arrow has both directions back and forth. You really stress this idea that what we do is, in nature, iterative. What we do has built-in failure, and only that failure allows us to improve on what we did before, and over again. It's not ever at the end of improvement. The idea is fostering this idea of growth mindset, right? Where we keep on improving. We don't actually stop. Even when we are satisfied with it, the best of us keep trying, right? Keep improving. That's what makes a difference. Now, one thing that we noticed, especially after the whole Snowflake success and the data influx of 2020, is that we have no idea where our data has been and where it's going, right? We have no idea how our data has been used in the company. We have no idea what's the end use of it. So it's very important to understand how data is used in the company, what are the main stakeholders, and more importantly, the quality of that data. That's why I'm so excited about data lineage. I don't know if many of you, probably most of you work with it. It used to be such a tedious manual work to keep track of data, to understand all of that. And now, thanks to automation and machine learning, it's easy peasy, right? We can scale it up easily, and we can really focus on the one aspect that we should care about. We used to have to focus on the volume. What we need is to focus on the veracity, right? We can actually really track the life cycle of the data source and really verify the goodness of that data, right? Can we actually trust it? Can we actually use it for the types of analysis that we are interested in too? So make sure you do all of that, and do not forget documentations, okay? I work with very large tech companies. Each single engineer, there are 2 engineers per team who have 2 hours per week. You know how much hourly salary a guru is? They have to sit down and produce documentation. And they have to link it everywhere. You know, it's everywhere. So remember that. Keep documentation up to date. And last but not least, we have to find a way to create a semantic layer. You know, a standardized, organized, approach to having, rely on information within the organization. We need to know what we mean, how we do it. And that's really hard to do, really, but the only thing I want to stress here is that we need to understand our North Star metrics, right? We really need to understand our North Star metrics. So if we don't agree on what that North Star metric is and how we build it, how we measure it, how we track it, then it's going to be very hard to have all a same objective. So this semantic layer is going to help us measure success in the same way. And then it becomes complex depending on what's the vertical, what's the specific goal of the team. So make sure you at least do it in that specific context. And of course, this is a world where we have to allow for change. Change just happens all the time. Make sure you update the semantic layer as you go. Now, let's switch gears a moment. And how many of you have taken statistics in their lives? How many of you use statistics on a daily basis? Yeah, that tracks. All right, so what are the types of errors we can make? Not our fault, of course. At least the first couple won't be your fault. Other one will say. First error, right? What did we do here wrong? Yeah, we did that, didn't we? Of course, the second error goes our usual false negative, right? You failed to reject the null hypothesis. That's not good. You guys remember what type 3 error is? I know. Only in academia we track that. What's type 3 error? It's our plague, guys. That's what plagues data science everywhere. It's when you do everything right. Right math, right tools, right theory, everything is great. But you put all that effort in doing what? In answering the wrong question. That's really disappointing, isn't it? This is the problem. Whose fault is this? I honestly blame academia. And not because the statistics class was not good. It's because we've been focused so much on those tools in the black box. How does it work? Everything detail. We train PhDs and computer science, engineering in understanding how every single tool works, right? What's inside that black box? And now the nitty-gritty details, the bolts, the nodes. And that makes sense. We want beautiful new products, right? Tools and technology, and that makes a lot of sense. But as time has gone by, now we have so many freaking tools, right? We have so much sophistication. But we've lost track with the other aspect of machine learning, that is the applied side. We spend so much time at defining the math and finding the right data set and figuring out the code, right, the algorithm. But we never really stopped. We were never really asked to stop and think about how do we ask the right questions from this data. What is the problem I'm trying to resolve? Nobody trains us to do it. And when I think, when I talk to you, business people have made some effort and made some progress, it's because business schools like the one I work at has made progress in trying to teach and trying to align in that domain. But unfortunately, the tech world has not been able to catch up as quickly. And the future, of course, is going to be in that direction. And this is really where we're going, right? The idea is we really focused on the sophistication of the math, the algorithm technology, and the data, but we haven't really learned how to solve the right problems, how to ask the right question. And this is where decision intelligence comes in. Decision intelligence is applied machine learning, analytics, data science, augmented by all the other many of the other social sciences, right? Applied psychology, managerial sciences, decisional sciences, all the other sanity check sciences that we need to help us frame the problem and therefore ask the question the right way. And we can't really find that unless our teams represent all these skills. So if we have companies that keep hiring researchers out, right, of academia, or poaching famous researchers from academia, then all we're doing is going and keep nurturing the side of machine learning that does research, which is great. I don't have any nothing against that. But then we are taking away from the other side, which is the applied side, how we turn what we do in actual value. So the future, what leads to good decision makers, includes a third component, which is let's think about what we're trying to do, and let's do it by applying some common sense. Let's stare at that data a bit longer. Let's work on visualizations a bit longer, right? We say, we forget something very important. All machine learning does is numerical optimization, okay? And they're getting better at that. It's great, but that's all they really do. And they're going to do what we tell them to do, right? They're going to optimize for what we tell them to optimize for. And you know what happens when we do that? If we are good decision makers, they will scale up intelligence. But if we are discrete or mediocre decision makers, it's going to scale up stupidity. It's going to speed up a solution regardless, right? So the problem is at the core. The problem is, let's think about what we're trying to solve first, and then we go and apply all of that. And what we've been doing so far is focusing on this side. And there's an analogy that many computer science professors I know use a lot. They refer to the research side of machine learning as those individuals that build, they say microwaves, let's say ovens, since we're in Italy. I guess microwaves are not as common. They build the ovens or the kitchen appliances, right? Those who apply machine learning, artificial intelligence in general, are the chefs. So what we're asking is, you spent most of your professional lives, perfectioning ovens over and over again. And now a company is asking you, well, since you made the oven, now you must be a great chef. I don't know if it works for you. Doesn't work for my husband. That's like our strategy becomes hope. We're going to hope I'm going to build, bring in this oven maker, and somehow it's going to make the leap and become a great chef. It might happen. It's happened in the past, but that's not a reliable strategy, isn't it? So what you want is to focus on understanding what is that you're trying to do and what is the best skill associated with it. So what is the future of AI? The reason why I'm stressing this applied side of machine learning is because that's where we're going. Tools are becoming easier. They're becoming accessible to everyone. And processes are becoming easier, right? So it really isn't important to know and to focus so much on the nitty-gritty details of those black boxes unless you want to keep building ovens. But now that we have warehouses and upon warehouses full of ovens, microwaves, and all sorts of kitchen appliances, perhaps it's time we really focus on how to apply those tools, what it takes to actually turn those approaches into value. And that's one of the things that really, I really like about data masters, that they do the training, of course, of the tools and the skills, but there is always an applied side to it. You don't just left hanging and figure it out by yourself. There's a lot of, let's think about how we use these things in real life. Now, if the epistle to data professionals, if this letter were a wish list, it would have just 3 wishes, okay? Become better decision making. Just means practice. Practice learning how to ask those questions. That's all. Sit with the data, understand what the objectives of the companies are, do all the 5 steps, right? All of them all need to be done and scaled up and sustained over time. It's not a one-time thing. And wish responsibly. Remember, those tools, they will scale up intelligence as well as stupidity. So you have to be don't blame the genie, right? Blame who makes the wish. So make sure you wish carefully, and make sure that your team has all sorts of individuals within it, okay? When you try, if you're at the beginning or you can have any effect on deciding who is going to join your team, make sure you really have a diversity of skills. If you end up having the copy of each other, you're going to do something, but probably it's not going to change much. It's not going to move the needle. Okay, and with that, I hope I made you uncomfortable, and thank you for sticking here with me.
Thank you very much, Donatella. It was super interesting. And we have a few questions for the audience in here. One of which is you mentioned the data flow and also the Lean style. There is something similar also related to other positions like data engineers. So all the things that you shared are can be translated also for other positions in IT, or you saw some difference in that?
They look a bit differently. They're a bit like more granular, less granular, but they're pretty much the same principle. And I can provide resources for that.
Yeah, thank you. There was some question related also on the business side people. So on your side, they're interested in know what they can share in their project. So you mentioned how data scientists should be more in lean to share data in a more plausible way. On the other side, do you think also that finance people, business people should share more to the IT? And what's your take on that, on how to do that?
Absolutely. And I think that goes both ways. Like in any relationship, it goes both ways. The real problem here is that we underestimate how hard it is to communicate with people like us, okay? It's really hard because it's all really a big black box. A lot of executives, very capable, very forward-looking, very open to change, they end up those meetings where I usually mediate, and they just didn't understand much of what was going on, right? So the idea is, yes, they should share and be proactive about it, but our effort is worth way more. If we make an effort to make the information accessible, meaningful, relevant, then it's going to be much easier to have this back and forth and actually check on each other through that feedback loop I talked about earlier. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. Actually, there is a question that was quite connected to that. It's about how to collaborate with people that are a little bit hesitant. So you mentioned eventually to see the decision maker, go there, have a talk. But what if there is some hesitance in collaborating?
There is nothing better than showing them results, right? That's how you convince the skeptical. So go back to where we actually explore. We run small experiments and we show the results, and we do this over and over again, and perhaps we line with their expectations. We listen carefully to them, and we try to build an experiment that might work in their own field. And that really is going to build that mutual trust. And that might also give you more leeway, right? Leeway means room to make the changes, to collect data, budget, to hire people. You really need that ongoing iterative process because it doesn't end in one experiment. It's an ongoing process. So you want to really gain their trust that way.
Thank you. You mentioned different times structure, flow, but in particular, I saw also myself in different industry, different way to have a sector, have a pod inside your industry. For the data science team, do you think it should be connected and included in the IT team, the business team, connected directly to CEO and report to that?
I mean, there are different organizational structures for data science. I do like the hub and spoke model, where you actually have data science belong to no one, right? It's just in the middle and has all this kind of like accessibility from all different departments and verticals, and then everybody taps on it. It becomes more challenging because you have to allocate resources, you have to go back to the famous ROI and figure out who gets what, but it's definitely the better way, at least in my experience, the better way to go.
Thank you. How you mentioned the North Star metric. Is the recommendation also related to potentially the disruptive effect of the good heart law? And I don't know if someone is in the room that want to articulate that question. Okay. Well, sorry. Okay. Sorry. I'm coming.
Yeah, so I quickly just looked it up just so I don't misquote him. But Goodhart's law, basically any observed statistical regularity will tend to collapse once pressure is placed upon it for control purposes. In short, once a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. How does that apply to the recommendation of establishing a single North Star metric?
This is what I was saying, it's very challenging to do and needs to be identified, agreed upon with the stakeholders, because you really need to capture that North Star metric has to be something you can't really get wrong, right? It has to be the one measure of success that is in line with the mission of the company, and that you can, of course, it becomes a bit more complicated. You have to kind of build boundaries around what means what, and now not to cannibalize other sectors, right? You might want to achieve better engagement, but you might be hurting perhaps new customer flow. So you need to be very careful about how you identify the North Star metric, and that's why it's so hard to do. But it definitely comes with some pitfalls that we need to try to avoid. And there are systems in place, by the way. I mean, it's very hard, and again, if you want to go more in details about that, there's a lot. And growth hacking, all those kind of strategies have a lot of documentation about that, because that's how they thrive. That's how they do well, because they identify the kind of metric that is really the goal that everybody can measure and act towards. I hope that answered your question. But just get me later, we can talk more.
Yes, and going back to methodology and models, do you think there is a model for data science that translates from the agile methodology that you saw can be translated to the data science team?
Experiment all the way. I mean, the whole idea of being agile is that you fail quick, right? So the idea is that you start slow and you try things out and you keep on learning and you keep on growing according to what you learn. That's pretty much the core of it.
Great. And what strategy do you recommend to resist counteract the business management that is latent urge to turn any useful metric into a target?
How do you, well, there is a lot of literature, so most of us do that. They go do their research, read white papers, look at use cases, that's how they identify those target metrics. I think the better way is to start understanding what are the objectives in the company, really talk it through, understand what success means for the company, and be also proactive in testing these ideas, and then coming up with one together. Now, the idea that makes Silicon Valley what Silicon Valley is that the idea is copy and improve, right? You want to learn from what other people are doing and then work towards a better solution. And that's where I think the difference is made. Now, the average approach is that look at the literature, the white papers do the same thing. The success is actually defined by being original in the way we do it, and we work all the theory part of the problem.
So experiment.
That's the key word, the takeaway. Stay in touch with the business people and experiment.
Yes. And talking about, again, staying in touch with the business people, some people probably is concerned about transparency in a way. Should also people in financial business share their own challenges in getting metrics for the budget, financial plan, their own failures and success, perhaps their less communication in the other side, or what's your experience, your take on that?
You know, my background might be misleading here, but I think everything is about finance, right? Whatever you want to do, it comes down to money. So yes, absolutely, the finance department should be always involved and always, but this is what we're talking about here. How do you foster this kind of communication? How do you actually get on the same page with the rest of the stakeholders in the company? And that it goes back to trying to create a channel communication in person and asynchronous so that we actually can learn as much as possible. Sometimes you have to decipher what we're trying to tell us and keep on insisting. Again, even this is an experiment from our standpoint, right? You're going to try different ways to talk to them, try different ways to interact with them, and find what works. So you're not allowed to give up on the first or the second try, right? You actually have to find a way to work with them.
Thank you. So perhaps one last question about delivering successful projects and reports. In the software world, product managers, owners exist for focusing on value delivery, a quite widespread agile concept. So in the same sense of the agile methodology that we mentioned before, you have any tips about the delivery of the values to perhaps managers and product owners, and also I guess inside within the team and within the larger
the way we present it?
Yes.
Well, it really, again, the concept here is meet your stakeholders where your stakeholders are. If they're technical background, it's pretty easy to walk them through delivery. If they're not, then storytelling is probably the best way. Of course, with solid foundation, right? Data and possibly ROI attached to it.
Yeah. So again, connected to the agile method is in this way an experiment. What is works based on the stakeholders,
exactly.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
And you can even build several experiments that tell a story, right? And then you can make that monumental change. But you're going to have the buy-in of your leaders because you're showing them results. You're showing them the metrics that matter for them to make the decision. Well, likely to make the decision. Now, if you're a product, they made you help up to a point, but then they just gave up, right? So you have that story too.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to share one last word. Well,
I really hope you do embrace the applied side of machine learning. I really hope you try at least a few of the things we talked about. And well, best of luck on your future data endeavors. Thank you so much, and keep on showing up at this event.
Thank you very much.